Unemployment among blue-collar people in America is 3 times what it is than among college graduates. And one of the principal reasons is that innovation that is occurring at the top is not being made here in America, and therefore people who are lower skilled are not reaping the benefits of the transformational innovations that we're creating in this country. We need to change that. The Wall Street Journal described my plan as supply-side economics for the working man, because I do apply supply-side economic principles to the area of manufacturing and processing in order to make it competitive, create a playing field, compete with China, that can compete with Mexico, not on labor costs, but on other costs. And if labor costs is the only differentiation, yes, we will lose those jobs that are high labor-intensive jobs, but we will keep most of the all of the good-paying jobs here in America. There's no reason to move other countries unless you want to have products delivered to that particular location. This is the best country in the world to export from. And we can be the export market for the world again if we create an environment. One of the key parts of that, and the reason I mention it, is not just a tax policy, which in our plan we eliminate the corporate tax for manufacturers. We allow money that was made in overseas to be brought back to America. Instead of paying a 35% tax, they pay no tax if they invest it in plant and equipment here in America. But one of the key elements is to keeping energy costs affordable here in America, because manufacturing obviously is one of the highest users of energy. So we not only need energy prices low, we need to have a competitive marketplace for power in this country, and allow that power to be moved and manufacturers to be able to get power in bulk quantity that's affordable and that can make them competitive. So we have to change the electric markets. I know a lot of that is certainly done by the states, but as the president, I'd like to see much more of a marketplace. We have that in Pennsylvania. It's working really well for us. And the more we can see that happen throughout the rest of the country, not only can we see rates go down generally, but we can see a lot more private sector activity in building transmission lines and power plants and the things that are necessary to build out our infrastructure as this country grows under a Santorum administration. With that, let me thank you all very, very much. I appreciate your time and attention. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Senator Santorum, because we do have these moderators on the stage, we'd like to pose a few questions first, and then hopefully we'll have some time to take some from the audience.
Great.
Because I am president of the Colorado Farm Bureau, the largest general farm organization in the state, I want to let you know that farmers and ranchers in Colorado, as well as the nation, are very frustrated with the Environmental Protection Agency, as you referred to. We, as Americans, do want clean water and clean air. We were very concerned about having a balance between that clean water and clean air and a reasonable energy policy, as you have mentioned, as well as balancing the regulatory burden that we carry. How do you see that balance being accomplished between those definite impacts and costs that come about because of the regulatory agency of the EPA? As you are probably certainly well aware, there have been conversations about greatly reducing their budget, possibly even eliminating it. You mentioned you'd like to reform perhaps the EPA. That question I'd like to pose you, how do you balance that, as well as another thing that is greatly concerning, and that is, do you really believe that the EPA is the right authority to protect air and water in this nation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would say in answer to your first question, the real key in balance, and I know people get very upset because of balance, but look, we balance everything in our life. I mean, everything. There's no absolutes when it comes to dealing with economic situations. And I mean, it's, you go in and, the grocery store, you're always balancing your checkbook with what your eyes want. I mean, you just don't go and do whatever you want, irrespective of the cost. There's always a rationing aspect. There's not unlimited resources. And the most important thing we need to do, which is what this administration has not done, which is to use sound science, not politicized science. We have seen the politicization of science like we have never seen before in the recent years. We saw it with global warming, an absolute travesty of scientific research that was motivated by politics, motivated by those, in my opinion, who saw this as an opportunity to create a panic and a crisis for government to be able to step in and even greatly and more control your life. I can tell you, I, for one, never bought the hoax. I, for one, understood just from science that there are 100 factors that influence the climate. And to suggest one minor factor, of which man's contribution is a minor factor in the minor factor, is the determining ingredient in the sauce that affects the entire global warming and cooling, is just absurd on its face. And yet we had politicians running to the ramparts. Unfortunately, politicians who happen to be running for the Republican nomination for president, who bought into man-made global warming and bought into cap and trade. Both Congressman Gingrich and Governor Romney both supported the idea of man-made global warming and, in fact, cap and trade. I never did, and unless the science is such that it is a heck of a lot better than what we see today, I won't. We need to have, not just on that score, but on a whole host of other scores. You look at these, mission things. Look, I come from southwestern Pennsylvania. I grew up in a steel town. I remember the smells of the mill. I know what can happen and the quality of life that can be affected by real dirty air. I encourage you to go back years and look up pictures of Pittsburgh. You can't see it. And I'm not exaggerating. You can't see it. It's black. The sky is dark all the time. That's how bad the smoke was in Pittsburgh. So we know dirty air. We know the problems. We also know that science now can measure things in the parts per gazillionth that they couldn't measure before. And these laws were written with the way the laws are written allow for the agencies to get into were written at a time when they didn't have these measurement tools, and it gives agencies wide discretion to use now science and these parts per whatever to further drive up costs based on laws that were not written for the measurements that we can now obtain. We need to rewrite those laws. And the issue is not the EPA. Rick Santorum's EPA is not going to be anything like Barack Obama's EPA. George Bush's EPA wasn't like Barack Obama's EPA. The problem is not the EPA that you'll get under Rick Santorum or Newt Gingrich or even Mitt Romney. The question is what happens afterwards. And the to and fro, back and forth, as a result of having different people there to rewrite regulations, to reinterpret regulations. Most of the things going on with the EPA are not regulations, but interpretations of regulations and authority. We need to rewrite laws. Abolishing the EPA doesn't get rid of the underlying laws of which the EPA has to enforce. Someone else is just going to enforce them, and what makes you think any other agency in government will do any better? I agree with the idea that we need to dramatically reform in this area, but that means we have to go and look at the laws. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. I'm going to be focused on clearly EPA to the extent we can with political appointees and trying to change the idea and the tenor there. But fundamentally, we have to go out and change the underlying laws if we want to see this, and that includes imposing things like requiring real science and in the calculation of cost benefit when the government moves forward on a regulation.
Thank you, Scott.